Okay, hello, dear viewers. Welcome to, I guess, part five, episode five of my dive into Lamentations of the Flame Princess, core rulebook, rules and magic. Um, Before we begin in earnest, I'm going to be organizing these presentations uh, to correlate to stuff that happens in my Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign, episode 5 of which was just completed the other night and is posted, so check that out if actual plays are your thing. But issues come up and prompt me to focus on those rules to address and present to you. So, this last episode, players were dealing with serious hit point loss after nearly getting eaten by a mutant demon frog, among other things. So I figured talking about hazards, healing, and experience would be a good thing, a good starting point, and a good topic for today. Um, and which kind of brings me to, I guess, if I had one complaint with the book, is that uh, the rules of the game are not organized by topic, like a section, a chapter on combat, a chapter on NPCs, a chapter on overland travel. It's just done in alphabetical order. So sometimes it's hard to find things. And for me, the way I think about rules and anything is more like a an outline, right? So you'd have point one, uh, you know, combat, and then subparagraph A would be, movement, right? That's just how I think. Back in the day, the second edition Dungeon Master's Guide I had memorized. I knew what page, I knew what paragraph when I was looking for something to reference. This book is a little harder, so hopefully the my presentations here are helping kind of put everything together. It's certainly helping me. I'll talk about this a little later on. I discovered that I misinterpreted some of the rules in the last episode of my campaign. So, but anyway, so hazards, what are they? Well, it's anything that can and will negatively impact your character. Okay, that's what's falls under this topic, hazards, and that's actually organized alphabetically too, which I appreciated. That was very much like the way I think, like an outline. And so the first one is ability score loss. Basically, the one something happens and your character loses a point of dexterity, charisma, whatever. The effect is immediate, and it affects your bonuses. So Constitution loss is pretty devastating because it'll immediately modify your hit points. So what I also really like is it doesn't matter what ability score. If it reaches zero, you're dead. I mean, that's it. It'd be interesting to interpret, like, loss of charisma. Like, is that like some sort of ennui, a deep depression? You lose all sense of humanity. I don't know, but that's what ability score loss does to you. The next one is aging, and that will have a permanent effect on your ability scores as you age. He gives some concrete rules here in a chart, so it's really simple to look at. Basically, you make a saving throw versus paralyzation at regular intervals once you reach a certain age. For humans and halflings, it's like 40. Okay, elves don't age, of course, so they don't have to suffer those effects. But and then as you get older, that saving throw is going to have penalties. So eventually, you will be losing points in your ability scores, and those are permanent because you're older. What I think I really like the most about this section, he the rules expressly state that if your character is aged magically, you have to immediately make all these saving throws. In I believe it was in second edition, possibly first edition. I played more second edition D&D, but like if you saw a ghost, it could age you 1d4 times 10 years if you failed the saving throw. If you aged 40 years in Lamentations, you'd have to immediately start making saving throws. I believe it would be almost 40 one for every year once your character gets past that 40-year mark. So if you were a 30-year-old character and you aged 40 years, you'd be making 30 rolls to see what you could die. I'm envisioning that scene from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where the guy drank the cup from the wrong cup and he just aged and died like right there on the spot. So very cool. I like that. Okay, damage. I think a lot of veterans know what this is all about, but Lamentations addresses hit point loss and what happens when you reach 0 hit points. I think in a more elegant and clearly defined way. Certainly, the rules compendium in Beckme, it was like if you're at 0 hit points, you're dead. Other editions of the game, offered all kinds of optional rules. I think this distills it down to a really nice, concrete way of handling it. Basically, at 0 hit points, you're incapacitated and you can't do anything. If you're at -3 hit points, you're dead. You're going to die in 1d10 minutes, and no magical healing or anything is going to save you. And then at -4, you're just dead. Um, why he put that distinction in there, not entirely sure. I suppose, you know, wasting away in 1d10 minutes could be like a dramatic death, and you can, like, I don't know, utter a death poem like some samurai warrior or something. But yeah, that's it. So you could come back, and we'll discuss this later. But you could come back if you're at like -1. Disease. He doesn't provide any list of diseases, but I really like what he did here because in other games, they really don't give you a mechanic or the thought process behind it. Here, he does. So, he gives you the characteristics of a disease: incubation period, infection time, interval, and effect. And essentially, once exposed, the referee makes the poison save on behalf of the character, and on a failure, the character is diseased, right? And then the incubation period passes, and at the end of that, another save is made, and then you apply an effect. Okay, whatever the effect of the disease is. And then there's these intervals. And when those intervals pass, another saving throw is made. On a failure, you suffer the effects. Very cool. Allows the referee, it gives the referee tools to create their own diseases, magical and otherwise. It's not meant to be for, the chronic, common sort of things like the cold or the pneumonia. Though I suppose you could if you wanted to get really simulationist about it. I believe RPG Pundit actually has rules for pneumonia in Lion and Dragon. So you could probably import that. But yeah. So I really like how disease is handled. Drugs and alcohol. Not too much here. They're treated like poisons, though they're less severe. And there's no list of them, so you can get kind of creative with what they do. There's no saving throw if you're intentionally taking the drugs and alcohol, and there's some rules for when you have an intoxicated character. I'm sure that happens quite frequently in everyone's campaign because why wouldn't it? Falling, I find humorous. It's a one-sentence paragraph, and it's got its own heading. So, and it's pretty standard. You see this rule everywhere. Um, but yeah, that's it. That's the rule. Poison. This is a uh, pretty straightforward as well. I mean, it could be anything. Hit point loss, instant death, ability score loss, etc. I do like how the distinction between poison and drugs is outlined here. If it's an all or nothing, you either save or die, or you either save or lose 20 hit points, or you save or lose 2d6 hit points, it's poison. If it's incremental, then it's a drug. I think that distinction is important and can help you in designing your own drugs and poisons and figuring out how they're going to work in your Lamentations game. So, and now starvation. Now, this is probably going to come up in my Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign because it took them 6 days just to get to the moat house, and they're already running low on food. I like these rules. They're very straightforward, and it's consistent. You fail your poison save and you lose some constitution, right? You fail your constitution save when you haven't had water in 24 hours and your constitution drops by half, and then half again, and then on the third failed poison save for lack of water results in death. Um, Constitution recovery though is twice normal rate, provided you're resting and eating. We'll cover that later in this video. And then sleep deprivation is pretty straightforward as well. It's a cumulative penalty, which I think makes sense. Um, 4 hours of sleep is what is needed. That also makes sense. Anybody in the culinary industry probably knows you can function 4 hours of sleep, especially if late night and then having to get up early to get to the kitchen. But though that's a story for another day. Okay, so healing. Now this is where I misinterpreted the rules because I didn't have it, outlined in my brain appropriately. But there's some really nice outline and breakdown of how natural healing works. And I think it's very realistic, and I think it makes a lot of sense. In other editions of the game, it's just sort of like this throwaway, oh, if you rest, you'll get like a point back. If someone makes their, you know, first aid check, you might get 3 points back or something like that. There was not a lot of thought put into it. At least it felt that way, and probably presumed that the cleric would just be casting, cure light wounds or something. Um, so anyway, to recover 1 hit point after a peaceful night's rest, you need to have at least half your hit points. So if your total hit points, your max hit points is 8, you suffer 3 points of damage, and then you rest that night, you'll get one back. And you're allowed to take your normal watch during the night. So long as nothing happens, you'll get that hit point back. If you rest for that entire day and not do anything, you can't do any activity. You can walk around and chat with people, and that's about it. You can get up to D3. So that 8 hit points, loss of 3, you could be fully recovered. There's a chance anyway at the end of a full day. Here's where it gets a little bit more brutal. If you have less than half of your hit points, you're in a lot worse shape. You recover nothing at night. And you need a full day just to get 1 hit point. So our example of 8 hit points, and you lost 5 in a combat encounter or poison, whatever, a trap, you're going to need a full day's rest just to get to 4. And then and then that evening you could probably get the next one and another full day's rest and so on and so forth. But that's pretty brutal. And then here we are back to characters with 0 fewer hit points. They'll wake up in 1d6 hours, cannot carry equipment, and can move or crawl at 10 feet per round. The only way you're going to get hit points back is if you're in a clean room and comfortable bed. Essentially, you are not in camp. You have to be taken home. And this is probably what should have happened in my Lamentations game this past Thursday. Um, don't worry, I won't make that mistake again. Sorry, guys, but someone's probably going to die the next time. But anyway, I think this actually makes a lot of sense, and I also think it's kind of cool that you could be at -2 hit points and awake. You're just crushed. You're beaten to hell. I think this makes a lot of sense and can provide for some interesting role-playing opportunities as the players who may have intended and desired to dive deep into the dungeon, but due to an encounter that went sideways, they're forced to go back and carry one of their buddies who's been mauled. Here's temporary ability score loss. Recover 1 point for all affected ability scores per day. So if you lost both Constitution and Dexterity, you'll get a 1 in each at the end of 1 day of rest. And then if you've been resting all week, in addition to that 7th point back, you'll get another one, an 8th. So you should be fine by the end of a week, depending on how bad you are. Obviously, this is for temporary, so if you have a permanent loss, well, it's permanent. Okay, so I like this rule. Characters can make no recovery if resting in a dungeon or similarly hostile environment. Um, I like this rule because I played a lot of 5th edition, and I don't know how many times, invariably, every session, after some couple of major fights in the middle of a dungeon, they wanted a rest, just a short rest. I really hate short rests. I hate that rule. I like this rule. This rule, it makes sense. I don't resting is more than just laying on the ground and not doing anything. You need to mentally be relaxed and capable of just like letting your body heal. I don't think you can do that if you're on high alert because there's undead down the hall. So I like that. And basically, you should look like this picture. I think, you know, uh, at the end of your adventure, beaten to hell, barely hanging on, but smiling because you made it and you have a wagon load full of gold. So that's healing in Lamentations, and that makes a lot of sense. So experience points. Basically, for veterans, you already know what all this is, but for newcomers to the hobby, experience points is how you level in Lamentations, and every class has their own chart. Some classes will advance faster than others. Elves, for example, are the most, I guess, powerful of the character classes, so they actually have the more they need more experience points to get to the next level. And when you get enough experience points to reach that level, you gain that level. It'll improve your hit points, improve your saving throws, and it'll improve whatever the class specialty is. So if you're a fighter, you're going to get a +1 to attack. If you're a specialist, you're going to get some skill points to distribute amongst your skills. If you're a spellcaster, you're going to get another spell slot that you can fill and prepare for the next day, next adventure. And if you're a demi-human, their skills and whatnot will improve as well. How do you get experience points? Well, first way is defeating enemies, but Lamentations of the Flame Princess expressly states that this is not a game about combat or slaying foes. That's because it's dangerous. I mean, if you're watching my Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign, Dagus Blackhammer, the dwarf, got mauled by a bear in the very first encounter, one day out of Hamlet. He was down to 1 hit point. He was hurting pretty bad. But combat will happen. So, for an enemy to be considered an enemy, it must be a threat and predisposed to hostility. So, killing random villagers is not going to do it. Or that South Park episode where they go out into the woods and just kill boars all day. You're probably not going to be able to do that in Lamentations, unless the boar is attacking you, I suppose. But to defeat an enemy, you just need to bring it to 0 hit points, or the enemy loses a morale check, or it surrenders. In my Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign, my players like to kill things that are running away. They don't have to. I think they're just bloodthirsty, I guess. Sneaking past an enemy does not count as defeating it. You may have avoided the encounter, which is a good thing, but it's not. The enemy is still there, ready to be hostile to you should you encounter it later. The book includes a chart to convert enemy hit dice to experience points. I think this is nice to have because, like I said in prior videos, there really is no bestiary specific to Lamentations of the Flame Princess. So if you're coming up with your own monsters, or you're looking at a module, you can just simply reference this chart to know what the experience value of that creature is. It's very nice. And then, of course, you can modify the hit dice depending on the creature's special abilities or not, or if it's a NPC that has character levels, you would increase the hit dice as well. So if it's like a 3rd level fighter, it's considered a 4 hit die creature for experience points purposes. Okay, the next A way of getting experience is recovering treasure. This is the money maker. Like, this is how you're going to do it. But not all monetary gains are counted as treasure. So, looting coins from bodies, rewards from NPCs, selling your equipment, stealing from NPCs, that sort of thing. None of that's going to count towards XP, your experience points. Okay, that's just extra treasure that you can use for equipment, but it won't convert to experience points. What will convert to experience points? Valuable objects recovered from uncivilized or abandoned areas, the adventuring site, and money hoarded by creatures who have no actual use for it. So that would be, the dragons hoard, the coins scattered about the giant wolf spider's den. Um, that's coin that will convert to experience points. XP is only calculated, however, when the treasure has returned to a secure location. So if they're still in the dungeon, they're not getting the XP. So, and that's what's happening with my Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign. They have some stuff that they have, and I think will actually help them make it to a level, or at least get them awfully close. But they're still at the Moat House, and they're a week away from Hamlet. So they have to get all that stuff to Hamlet to get that experience points. And in Lamentations, one silver piece of value equals one experience point. And then I really like this. I'm glad it's stated. The experience is divided between all surviving party members equally. So, if your group, let's say, has 1,000 silver pieces, and you decide as a group to give a disproportionate share to the fighter so he can buy some plate mail, that fighter is not going to get more XP than the rest of the group. That 1,000 points gets divided equally. It's just the fighter is going to get some more silver per what the group decided. All right, so what happens when you gain a level? Well, first thing you do, you have to get to a secure location. So if you're in the middle of a dungeon and you get awarded some XP that brings you up to the next level, you don't get the benefits yet. You have to go home. What I do like that you typically see in other iterations of Dungeons and Dragons is that there's training. In Lamentations, there isn't. I can go either way with the whole training rules, but I think it's kind of fiddly, and I like the fact that Lamentations is choosing not to use training. When you do get to a secure location, all benefits are immediately applied. So you get to add your hit points, improve your saving throws, so on and so forth. Damaged characters add hit points to both current and max hit points. So if you went from 8 to 13 in terms of max hit points because you rolled a 5, but you already suffered 3 damage, your max hit points would be 13, and your current hit points would be 10. Spellcasters still have to prepare all spells as normal. Yes, they may be able to prepare an additional spell, but they don't automatically start with a prepared spell. And we'll be getting into magic rules eventually, but magic users and elves get a free spell that's in their spell book, but they still have to research it. They just don't have to spend the silver to do so. So there's time that will pass in game. And this is an interesting rule that I will be using. But 1 level gained per game session, and any experience points beyond halfway to the next level is lost. That really controls how fast the party levels and advances in the game. Some people may not like that. I think in earlier editions of the game, uh, if you gained a level and had enough experience points to get to another level, you were just dropped to 1 point below. Here it's a little bit more severe. Okay, so to sum up, hazards are clearly defined in a general enough way so they are tools for the referee to use to generate whatever encounter the referee desires. I like that, and that makes uh, the core book Rules and Magic a tool set for the referee, and that's a good thing. Hit point recovery is pretty specific but realistic in my opinion. But in some ways, it's more forgiving than other iterations of the game. Again, back me if you had 0 hit points, you're dead. That you were dead. Um, so in some and in Back Me, you didn't have minimum first level hit points. Like if you were a fighter that rolled 1 for your hit points, well, there you go, and you're probably going to be dead in the very first encounter. Um, and then experience points and leveling is pretty standard for the OSR, um, and designed to keep things moving at a controlled pace. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for listening. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share the video. Get people looking at Lamentations and playing Lamentations. By all means, hit like and subscribe, the bell icon, yada, yada, yada. But I do appreciate you taking your time and watching this video. Until next time, take it easy.